Hello, friends. Welcome to day 60 of 75 Refined. The quote of the day is from Albert Einstein: "In the middle of every difficulty lies opportunity." And today was a crescendo. We wrapped up the book of Matthew, chapters 18 through 28, and then tomorrow we start the book of Mark. All right, so let's high level overview, talk about some of the major themes that we went through today. So everything has been building to this point. The teachings, the rejection, the crucifixion, and the resurrection. This is the turning point, literally, of history. Okay, and we're going to see this play out three more times as we go through the other three of the four Gospels. Matthew is one of what we call the synoptic Gospels. Matthew, Mark, and Luke are the synoptic Gospels. John is called the spiritual Gospel. Um, let's get into the big picture here. Also, just in terms of Matthew, most scholars agree that Mark was probably written first. It's probably the earliest of the Gospels. There is a growing group of scholars that believe that Matthew may predate Mark, but they don't know for sure. And going back to the idea of Mark being written first, they believe that because there's some similarities, that Mark may have been used as like a source material for Matthew and Luke. There is another potential source that they have no basis for whatsoever in terms of artifacts or writings or anything like that, but it's called Q. It comes from the German, I think, word Quella, basically. I believe. I could be saying that wrong. But basically, the belief is that there are two sources that Matthew and Luke reference, which is this anonymous Q work and then Mark. And then, of course, Matthew's own writings. And then Luke would have referenced Q potentially and Mark, and then Luke's own interviews that he did because Luke was not an eyewitness. But again, the Q thing, it's widely accepted, but still speculative. Okay, because there's no real proof of it, but it is a speculation because there's themes throughout all three of them that are very similar, that are similar between Matthew and Luke, but not in Mark. So, anyways, but I digress. It's more of a history lesson kind of a thing to give you a little bit more than just what's on the page here. So, big picture here. So we have the kingdom relationships and humility in the first couple chapters that we read today, 18 through 20. And then we have the confrontation in Jerusalem. Then we have the end times and readiness in 24 through 25. And then we have the death and resurrection of the King, the Messiah. All right, so Matthew 18, this is kingdom humility. The greatness is about being humble. Become like children. We have the parable of the lost sheep and forgiveness. Forgive them 70 times 7. Takeaway here is that to pursue the lost and forgive radically. We also have in here one of the orders of church discipline, um, specifically how to deal with a brother who offended you. We have that in Matthew 18. All right, the cost of following in chapter 19, talk about marriage and covenant, the parable of the rich young ruler. And the key verse here, because, and this is something I want to get into in another video, a verse, and I talk about this a lot. It's a verse where people kind of take it out of context because they actually invent history that comes about 1,500 years after the story in the Bible, about the camel and the eye of the needle. We'll get into that. But the key verse here is that with man, this is impossible, but with God, all things are possible. You cannot enter the kingdom on your own terms. Matthew 20 talks about the same pay for different hours. Grace is not earned. So the same grace is offered to somebody who was born and raised in the church as somebody who came to faith as a child, came to faith as a teenager, came to faith as an adult, elderly, or somebody who came to faith on their deathbed. That same grace is earned. Now, there's something to be said about the reward you have in heaven for the works and all that kind of stuff, and we see that in the judgment that we go through, which is a different type of judgment, but in terms of grace, it's all the same. It's all the same. Let's see here. We also have the prediction of his death in chapter 20, and then 21. He enters Jerusalem. This is the triumphal entry. Remember on Palm Sunday just a couple weeks ago. This is a fulfillment of Zechariah 9:9. And the temple cleansing, this is, man, Jesus flipping tables. We see this fleshed out more in later Gospels. Leaders begin plotting because Jesus starts making himself very well known in Jerusalem. Matthew 22, there's confrontation. They try to set traps for him, but Jesus, he's a smart guy, and so he doesn't answer them directly. He asks them questions for clarification and I mean just divine wisdom, not as a way to get out of it, but to confound these accusations, the accusers, about taxes, the wedding feast, resurrection, all of this. And what is the greatest commandment? To love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and your neighbor as yourself. Then Matthew 23, he exposes hypocrites. He calls them whitewashed tombs. I mean, just full of dead man's bones, right? I mean, on the outside, it's clean, it's beautiful, it's wonderful. You know, you wash the outside of a cup, but inside it's filthy. It's all these things about showing about how they are so outwardly pompous and outwardly religious and everything, but inside they're vile. And at this point, judgment is now unavoidable. So in Matthew 24 and 25, we have what's called the Olivet Discourse. This is where Jesus starts talking about the destruction of the temple, the sign of the end, and parables for readiness. We have the talents, the virgins, the sheep, and the goats. And this is all about being ready. Matthew 26, the Last Supper. This is my body. This is my blood. This is the communion that we do. I know different churches have different traditions. For our church, we do communion on the first of the month, and that's another thing that I'll have a separate teaching on about the significance of the Last Supper and communion and the Passover Seder. So we'll talk about that. The Garden of Gethsemane. This is, not my will, but your will be done, Lord. This is a time where the humanity of Christ conflicts. Conflicts is probably the wrong word, but you see the humanity of Christ as he's taking on the burden of the cross, even though he hasn't even gone to the cross yet, but he knows it's coming. Matthew 27, we have this kangaroo court, this mockery, this trial, that false accusations, a crown of thorns, and then we get into the crucifixion, and Jesus cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Which is a reference to Psalm 22, and anybody who is around would recognize that psalm. Any Jews would recognize that psalm. It's just like if I was to start saying, if I were to start, saying, we will, and you would finish rock you, because we all know the song, right? And so for religious Jews of the day, for Jesus to say, my God, why have you forsaken me? They would immediately recognize, they pierced my hands and my feet, right? And they divided my clothes. It's all right there, and then it would start being this kind of aha moment for a lot of them. The the temple and the veil is torn. This is such a powerful moment because the temple was what separated the presence of God from everybody else in the Holy of Holies. And when Jesus died and the temple was torn, that was a physical change in the temple, but it was also a spiritual change for all of us because now we all have access to God. We don't need the temple system any longer. We can worship in spirit and in truth. Then Matthew 28, the resurrection, the empty tomb, the miracle of miracles. This is what separates the men from the God, basically, is that he is not here, he is risen. And this is what it's all about. We'll get more into the resurrection at a later time. But it wraps up with this, with the Great Commission. So all authority on heaven and earth is given to him. Now he's telling us to go, make disciples, baptize them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. And that he is with us always, even to the end of the age. So the whole day here, we have the humble king, the demanding king, the rejected king, the returning king, the sacrificial king, and the risen king. We have multiple prophecies that are fulfilled. Zechariah 9:9, Psalm 22, Isaiah 53, the suffering servant. The king was rejected, crucified, and buried, but on the third day he rose with all authority, proving that his kingdom cannot and will not be stopped. And that's it for us today with Matthew. Obviously, a lot happened. And we're going to kind of go through some more perspectives over the next several days as we go through the other Gospels, Mark, Luke, and John. And the synoptics, again, there's a lot of carryover, but there's some differences, key differences on who wrote it for what purpose and all that. And we'll get into that as we introduce the Gospels. But that's all today, friends. Remember, like, subscribe, do all the things. And love you, praying for you. We have 15 days left. We're rocking it. I love it. Love you guys. We'll see you tomorrow.